Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Greg Sands with us. Greg, thanks for coming on the program.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be an exciting episode, but let me tell people about you a little bit in case they don't know who you are. So you are the founder and managing director of Costa Noa Venture Capital. But beyond that, you've been investing in early stage companies for 15 years now, over 15 years. But here's some really interesting stuff about your past that people have to dig to find out a little bit. You were the first hire at Netscape after its founding engineering team was on board, and you were the first product manager at Netscape. You actually coined the name Netscape. You wrote the initial business plan, and you created a business unit within Netscape that grew from 0 to 150 million in revenue. So basically that means we should listen to what you have to say, right?
Well, I try to tell my kids that. They don't seem to listen as well. But no, look, I think I've been really fortunate to be in some very interesting places and part of the development of some really exciting businesses. It's always a team effort. It takes a lot of people working together to create a great company, but that's part of the challenge of growth hacking and company building.
Yeah, well, that's a very humble response, but the truth is you were probably responsible for a lot of the success that you made happen. So let's dig into what you figured out, what you learned, and just kind of give us your insights on the world so that we can replicate some of that success if possible. So here's my first question for you. This is a show about growth hacking, growthhacker.tv. It's what we talk about. What does growth hacking mean in a B2B startup? We're so used to hearing about Airbnb, growth hack Craigslist. We're so used to the consumer kind of viral loop of growth hacking. What does it mean in a B2B startup, though?
Absolutely. So, we spend basically all of our time in the context of business to business software environments. And most of the time, what you'd think of as growth hacking is really about the process of trying to achieve product market fit. And so it's finding your audience and understanding, mapping that audience's needs into product and doing that so that you can solve their problem on a repeatable basis. And what I think in the consumer landscape, one can basically say, I'm trying to get broad reach. And I'm trying to get in front of a lot of people, and I'm going to use growth hacking to do that, and then create a viral loop. Well, in the business-to-business environment, it really is more that you want to get in front of the right audience, and you usually have to interact with the market in order to figure out what that audience is. And so, to me, it's in the end, it ends up the process of learning about the various segments that you might potentially address, meaning, is it a small business customer or is it a mid-sized company customer? And then usually you've built a 1.0 product, you've got it in front of some people, and you might have to make some decisions. That is, if you decide you're going to go after the small customer, you might need to build easier onboarding scripts and actually simplify the product so that they can be successful, because they don't have deep teams, they don't have as much specialized capability. If you go after a mid-market customer, you might find that you're missing 3 product features, or that you've got to build standard connectors in order to be able to repeatedly solve their problem. And for example, if you end up saying, no, we really have to go after enterprise customers, you might need to do things like single sign-on or a security audit, or build an API for them to do their customization, so you don't have to do that customization. But that process of taking the market and the product, and then ultimately the marketing and sales, where do I find those customers, and how do I close them, and get the alignment. I've sometimes talked about that as the kinesthetic chain of the business, right? Like throwing a baseball, or it starts with your hips, and you just got to pull the rest of the body in through it. So you got to get product right, but you can't get product right without answering the question, for whom?
Yeah. In your experience, whether it's, firsthand or watching the startups you invest in, once they find product market fit, does that unlock growth? Because I'll tell you, one of the fears I have as a founder and as an entrepreneur is focusing on product means I'm not focusing on top of funnel today. I'm focusing on something deeper, more fundamental, and it makes me a little bit uneasy. Like, well, I'm not going out, I'm not acquiring new customers, I'm not doing all I can at the top of the funnel. But have you seen that focus on product actually does unlock growth, just not right this second?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. So one, I think you still need to be interacting with the market. And sometimes that's as a founder yourself. Sometimes you have one or two sales or marketing or business development people who are also doing that. So it's a little bit like, so working on the product in a vacuum isn't any good. You know, it's like a shark. You got to be moving forward or you die. It's absolutely the case that once you get product right, it unlocks growth, and that shows up in basically customer acquisition costs and customer retention, price points, lifetime value, right?
Yeah.
So that core equation, customer acquisition costs to lifetime value, is what you're working. And people who have better product market fit have better ratios, right? And so that absolutely happens. Now, product market fit isn't static, right? So it often unlocks growth, and you get a period of growth, and then and this happens a lot in our portfolio, is you might, if you start out focused on mid-market customers, for example, often 1,000 to 10,000 employees, you unlock growth for that category. Then to sustain that growth, you need to move up market, and that requires you to build some of those enterprise features in order to unlock that next tier of growth.
Yeah.
But it's unequivocally the case that in the business-to-business environment, in the SaaS environment, product market fit translates to better unit economics of sales and marketing. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Now, let me ask you this. How do you know when you've found product market fit? Because in my experience, there's success and then there's success. There's, customers coming in and then there's customers pouring in. But sometimes it's hard to know which camp you're in. Is this as good as it gets and I need to go think about acquisition now? Or is the product still broken enough that I'm not acquiring them with the unit economics that I could acquire them with? Is there any telltale signs that you've nailed it, at least for this period of time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do have a lot of founders, who come to me and say, hey, what was it like in the early days of Netscape? We're grinding on this thing here, and I'm trying to figure out, are we doing something wrong?
That's the question. Are we doing it wrong, or are we on the right track here?
That's right. And I think that in some ways, truly, customer acquisition cost to lifetime value, obviously that's price point times, customer retention, right? Basically, effectively. Is the backward-looking indicator, right? But it is backward-looking. So I think that question, the product management discipline, which a founder in a B2B startup has to own, right? I mean, you just, in the early days, until you have a fully developed team, you have to own it. And so the challenge is, I'd say to declare yourself having product market fit, it means you address the problem of a core constituency. That could be a functional group or it could be a size company. You do that repeatedly. It can be explained to them in a way that they understand it. It can probably be sold by a mere mortal, meaning if the founder is the only person who sold the product, I don't think you can quite declare product market fit. And not lots of customization or custom engineering in order to get a customer successful. There can be deployment and integration and the like, but not custom engineering. And to me, that's the definition of product market fit.
I've never heard a definition of it so clearly, so that's awesome to hear. Have you ever had a founder in your portfolio that had product market fit and didn't know it? Or is it always the other way around, that they think they have it and they don't?
It's usually the other way around, right?
Okay.
I mean, usually I think what happens is people say, hey, I've sold 5 customers. Right? And so we've got product market fit, and now it's time to scale, right? And in particular, I think people say, I've sold the first 5 myself. Now all I need to do is to hire a sales guy, which is usually what they say, even if the founder's a woman, and then and then we're okay. And to me, that shows a lack of understanding of the process, right? Because that notion of repeatability. Mere mortal, someone who didn't invent the product can explain what it does, and customers care about it. And you need to be able to, and people have a hard time, I think, they'll end up saying, hey, look, we want to do, I'll give an example within our portfolio, right? Stitch Labs is an inventory and order management company for multi-channel e-commerce vendors. And you start out and saying, hey, we have a whole bunch of customers, right? And people love the product. And that's right. When we, that was true, 2.5 years ago when we initially got involved with the company. But at the same time, this question of, hey, are they smaller customers? Are they mid-market customers? What price points are they willing to pay? How many of them, do we know, which e-commerce platforms they're integrated in? Do we know which standard analyses they need? As we have broadened and deepened that product, I think we can now comfortably say lots of different people can sell it. Customers are really willing to pay for it. So it solves a real problem for them. There's an ongoing set of things that we need to do, but they can make themselves successful with it. And we've added a set of features and capabilities where mid-market customers can also be successful with it. And to me, that's a great example of doing the work, which is fundamentally, this is the thing, right? Initial product creation is both art and science, but actually the analytic job of product management to achieve product market fit for a specific audience is actually a pretty disciplined, analytic, rigorous process.
Yeah, as I hear you talk, I just keep thinking about the two words, product market, and there's a handful of questions about your product, and there's a handful of questions about the market, and the more of those answers you have, the closer you probably are to product market fit. I see in your answers knowing who your product is for, knowing what the market wants, knowing what they're willing to bear, seeing them be able to use the product without your help. And so when you have product and market, but you have more questions than answers, you're probably not there yet. When you have all the product and market questions and you start to get some answers, it seems like you're on the right track.
Yeah, I think that's right. Even at the founding stage, when we're looking at, we look at companies that are both at founding stage and then sometimes often after they've had a seed investment, so they're 12 or 18 months in and they have initial product and market. And so, we're willing to go in and do what I'll call that product management work to say, okay, it's too early to declare product market fit, but can we see the signs of it, right? It isn't showing up yet in the backward-looking financials that other investors are looking for, but we're willing to go interview customers ourselves and try to build that constituency, build that perspective, I should say. But the thing that was, we're talking to founders, you're either looking for, in some categories, a big product innovation, right? A technical innovation that lets a company do something that no one could do before, right? And everyone gets that. I think the other perspective, and the part that's lost, it's the market part of product market fit, is a unique insight or perspective on the market, which often lets you go solve a problem that other people aren't thinking about or solving it in a different way.
Yeah.
And it's that insight about the market that I think is actually the missing ingredient for most young companies.
Is that the Peter Thiel, what do you believe that no one else does, that kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely.
The insight in the world that people think you're a heretic and actually you just see the future?
Yeah, exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And in many of these categories, you're operating in a domain that where there are, it may be unsexy, it may be in the back office, it may be for a vertical that other people don't care about. But the small business and entrepreneurship professor that I had when I was in business school is Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great and a bunch of other
famous. Yeah.
And the thing that he would go back to LL Bean as an example, right? And he kept saying, "Wet feet make boots." Like, it's not that complicated, right? And so, again, LL Bean was a hunter, built the boots that he needed in order to, for that use case. So in the business to business context, it usually is people who've been living in that problem, who come from that industry, who, they've been, who started the early leading Salesforce automation company? Tom Siebel. He was a VP of sales at Oracle, right? It was somebody who was living with that experience, and that experience, you can get it by saying, I'm going to go into this industry, I'm going to study it, and I'm going to figure it out. But it's an awful lot easier when you're sitting there dealing with the problem yourself.
Is it hard to have that radical insight when you have domain expertise? Because with domain expertise comes indoctrination of the way it should be done. So you have to almost get the experience, figure out domain expertise, but somehow still be radical enough in the way you view it to do something totally different when you get the chance. Is that true?
Absolutely. It's absolutely right. And so and I think you You do need to have enough experience to do it, and therefore we've got, we end up with lots of founders who are in their late 20s and early 30s, but probably fewer that are right out of school because you haven't
know
been
anything
living
yet.
with that particular problem yet.
Yeah.
The problems that you faced are consumer problems, but not business problems. But then it's also the case that it's at least, and it's not that it fades away with time, but it's a discipline to say, in some ways you can think of it as the engineer's discipline to say, but how could this be done better, right? How could this be automated? How could we take something that takes 3 months and do it on a daily basis, and just map it into a process where it happens automatically?
Yeah.
Where are we making bad decisions as an organization repeatedly, and we can build something to make good decisions?
Yeah.
And what's interesting for us is that has led us to some interesting examples of things that actually start with a very unsexy back office. So an example like Acme Ticketing is a portfolio company of ours. In the long run, they want to help providers of what we call recurring events, museums, fairs, amusement parks, water parks, winery tours, and others, deliver a great and seamless real-time mobile ticketing experience that lets them do revenue optimization, price optimization, bundling, unbundling, and marketing in the way that good digital products do that. But in order to do that, the guys came from the industry, you actually have to start on the back end and look at things like resource management and inventory management, and take these things that were paper-based processes and map them into a cloud-based system so that you have the agility to do the front-end analytic work that's required to deliver a great customer experience. And that to me is a great example. I can look at this and say, I want going to the museum to work like going to the movies. I want to have that kind of experience, but that kind of ticketing experience, that kind of mobile experience. But boy, I've got to reinvent the supply chain in the back office so that people don't have to do it with phones and fax.
Yeah, it's the iceberg below the surface that you don't see, where a lot of the innovation's happening. By the time you see the innovation above the surface, there's been, hundreds of hours of, work put in to get the product market fit behind the scenes. So here's the question I have is, I think about what you're telling me about product market fit and how you can even have some seed money, you can be 18 months in, and there's some signs of it, but you haven't hit it yet. So it's not this short-term process. You're not going to find it in a month. It takes time, a little bit of money, a little bit of energy. In that process, you're iterating, you're learning, you're changing the product, you're listening to feedback, you're putting in those features that the mid-market needs, that the low market didn't need, all that stuff. But then isn't everything just getting out of whack, out of a line? Because every time you change your product, it messes up your pipelines, it messes up the kinds of people you need on your team, it messes up, the business is built on the product. How do you keep everything in order as you're iterating on this product and learning as you go?
Yeah, it's a really tricky process, and it's the hard part about being a founder and CEO, that you're the person who needs to put all those pieces together in your head and make sure that think of it as you need to make sure that your business model compiles, right? And lots of times it doesn't because you're moving too many pieces at once. And so I do think it requires even at relatively small scale. There are both qualitative parts of it and quantitative parts of it, right? So the qualitative parts of it are you're interacting enough with customers that you hear the objections. One of the things I love doing as a venture capitalist is saying, okay, you've got a new company. I've got a friend who's a potential customer. Let me do a ride along. You pitch it to him. You literally try to sell him the product, and I'm just going to sit in the room. And because you can hear the objections, and if you do 10 of those, you can actually piece together, is it the same objection every time? Is it different objectives? If it's a different objection in every single case, that tells you something, right? Might be hard to build a standard product for it. And I think, but the founder's job is to do that and to interact with the market and to try to interpret that data. That part of it is still, it's analytic, but it's qualitative analytic. Then I think you do, in fact, need to go forward from that process and say, okay, if we think it's a mid-market customer, let's go where can we get in front of a bunch of them? Where do they hang out? What are the media properties? What are the trade shows? What are the customers? In the case of Stitch Labs, you've got folks like Shopify who are great partners and have a conference, and you can show up and you can talk to a lot of customers. And can you explain it to them in a way that gets people excited and interested? And then even if it's at relatively small scale, you've got you've got to end up with a sales or a business development person to say, not just as a founder can I close them, but can someone else be taught to do it, right? I think this notion, if I take the mid-market example, usually I think takes a focused effort, right? So I would like in that case, the founder or a head of product management to say, okay, I'm going to go interview 20 mid-market customers. I'm going to try to explain it to them. I'm going to try to get their interest. And that group is isolated from the rest of the group, right? What is their set of objections? What is the price point they're willing to pay? What other systems do I have to connect to, or do I have to rip out in order to do it? And that you can do, and before you're in a world where you're saying, hey, I got a pipeline of 100 inbound customers, and I'm trying to retroactively go back and sort them into groups and do that analysis. You eventually need to do that, but you got to start out by, I think, interacting with the market on your own.
Yeah.
If you're in that slightly later stage and it's you're trying to add a segment, you might appoint a sales rep to say, hey, we're going to flow all the mid-market leads through you, and you can kind of keep it contained.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely the case that misalignment leads to inefficiency and muddled decision making and inefficient sales and marketing. And the problem is in the current landscape, where it takes relatively little cost to build initial product in many cases, the place where you're going to blow all your money is on sales and marketing. So you're actually way better doing your work on small scale to achieve product market fit before trying to ramp up sales and marketing.
I heard a quote once, and I don't know who said it, but somebody knows. They said that, marketing prematurely is just being in a rush to tell everybody how much you suck.
Yeah.
Like, let's get them all in to see that there's no product market fit, and so they can just bounce and leave and not, really use the product. And I love what you said. I think this is the quote of the interview, that a CEO's job is to make sure the business model compiles. I mean, that's it. And that's a hard job. There's a lot of bugs, when you try to compile it. Every day, I'm going through it right now. Every day I try to compile, half the days it doesn't. I'm like, all right, what do I got to rethink, redo, change? But that's awesome. Another thing I thought about as you were just talking, because there's just so many ideas in here, I just finished a book today called Small Data. It just came out last week. And, big data is all the rage. Let's get into the big data. Let's look at the numbers. And so when I saw a book titled Small Data, I was like, all right, I need to see what the opposite end is saying. And it's basically a book, not against big data totally, but saying you got to get in front of the people that you're trying to figure out, because there's going to be little clues, hints, things you see. You do your detective work one-on-one, and all of a sudden you can make sense of the big data because of what you learned in the small data, the qualitative, the one-on-one, the getting in front of the 10 customers, the going to the Shopify conference, like that kind of stuff. And when I got done reading the book, it hit me. It's small data and big data. Data is what matters. You need some small, you need some big, and then you need smart people in the middle figuring out how to make it all compile when you get it together.
Absolutely right. No, I couldn't agree more. And that's the intersection of qualitative and quantitative. It's the intersection of anecdotal and and large amounts of data. But I think that piece that says actually talking to customers and understanding their issues and understanding, it's very easy for us to talk as an industry, to talk technology forward, right? Here's our features. This is what we do. And customers usually don't actually care, right? They have a job they're trying to get done. They want that job to be done better. They want it to be done more efficiently. They have a bunch of other concerns and issues that they have to work through, and sometimes constraints. And I think hearing that for yourself as a founder is absolutely critical. And it is a stage that basically precedes trying to gather significant quantitative data.
Yeah.
It's much less expensive.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's within the realm of mortals before they, have all this funding and headcount and all that stuff. So, with the founders you've seen up close and personal, what do they do to move along that growth curve faster? Is it just all the stuff we're talking about, getting that product market fit, focusing on that? Is there anything else you see that they do uniquely well? The ones who really progress through the curve faster than their peers?
Well, I think that the one other thing that I'd say, and this is it's a little tangential to your question, but I think that the founders that are focused on their own rate of learning also seem to be the ones that get to product market fit, and then from product market fit, by the way, then you just have earned your way into the starting line on sales learning curve, right? So
Yes.
you're always learning.
Mm-hmm.
You're always learning. And so the ones that are curious, that are investing in their own development, they're reading books, they've got mentors, they talk to their peers, they're trying to get better, and therefore they're thinking about these ideas, and they're challenging themselves.
Yep.
They're surrounding themselves with people that have more knowledge and more experience than they do. Mm-hmm. Sometimes as mentors, sometimes as coaches, sometimes as board members, sometimes as investors. Sometimes they have the wherewithal to hire them into the company. But I think that, to me, is the dominant characteristic of the people that succeed.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thinking about just the always learning and that kind of attitude. Just this week at our team meeting, I told them we've now earned the right to solve harder problems. Because that's the way I feel about it. Like, you solved yesterday's problems, which means you've earned the right to learn new things and figure out something we never tackled before. And if you're not getting the right to do that, you're failing. And so it's an opportunity when things get harder. We had 100 customers. Well, now with 1,000, it's harder. With 10,000, we have to learn even new things. So you're always trying to figure out the next step. So I totally agree 100%. All right, another question on partnerships. I think about B2B, and partnerships seem to be such a key component of B2B businesses, more so than B2C. What should a startup founder be looking at in a partner to help them grow? How should they kind of approach that whole beast?
Absolutely. Well, so most of the time, I will say, these partnerships, they play a critical role, but they're the second phase rocket booster.
Okay.
So no partner can sell your product if you haven't figured out how to sell it yourself.
Okay.
Right. And so, that notion that says, product market fit, and with that, the notion that somebody other than the founder has been, successfully been taught or taught themselves to sell the product and to do that reasonably repeatedly. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, can you, is there a partner where it's really in their interest? So to me, I come back to this basic notion of alignment, because in order for that partner to be successful, and we have some companies that have had very successful partnerships, but it's hard, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, partnerships are like Microsoft products. The third version likely works, but the first and second don't. And so it's got to be in their interest to have you be successful, right? Solves a problem for their customer base that they don't have another way of solving. They have to be able to, oftentimes, to make enough money that it actually is material to their business as well. Unless it's a raging objection to their product, and so they're happy to pass it along.
Helps their
right?
retention, even if it doesn't help their bottom line or something.
You got it, exactly. Their sales reps, so you're going to have to. One of the reasons you've got to be able to sell it yourself by someone other than the founder is that you're going to have to train their sales reps, right, to actually move the product and explain the product, and they're going to have less incentive to do it. They're going to be less knowledgeable than your sales reps are. They're going to care less about it. I mean, they've got to get quota credit. If they're not getting quota credit, it really doesn't matter to them. But the likelihood is that it's going to be a relatively small amount of their quota, and so even when they get quota credit for it, and it can be a material addition to their comp, and you get in front of their sales conference, and so you get to train them up, and you've been successful before. Even those, I think, have about 1 out of 3 chance of success. And if you don't have all of those, don't even bother.
Wow.
Just wait.
So if it's just a secondary rocket booster, there's a 1 in 3 chance when everything's aligned and you've nailed a lot of stuff. Should we just not worry about partnerships for a long, long time? I mean, is that the takeaway?
I think it is. So first order principle, yes,
Okay.
right. It is the case that you've got to figure out how to build and sell your product and do that in a way that's where the sales to marketing cost to customer acquisition is reasonable relative to price point and expected retention, right? And that is your core job. And for 90% of B2B companies, that's the most important thing, and you got to start there. And if you look at it and say, there's no way I can make that work, honestly, like I'm not sure I'd spend my time there, right? On the other hand, I will say the partnerships, when they work, can be explosive and can be big amplifiers. So I'd say once as you start getting to that point, it is worth investing small amounts of time and energy, and that can be the founder, or it can be ultimately someone who's got a more of a biz dev orientation. Sometimes a really good product person can take 10 or 20% of their time, because I don't think you don't want to ignore the big companies in the space. You want to be willing to to meet with them and to figure out if there's something there. But it's low probability of success, so you actually have to be rigorous about qualifying it.
Yep.
And if you say, you have a good meeting and you say, great, let's figure out whether, we can get all 5 of these things lined up to work. And they say, oh, we would never do that. You can say, hey, we've had the meeting right now. We just got to execute on our business. And but you're better off by having done that work. So I'd say, for a standard SaaS company, in year 1, I wouldn't spend any time on it. In year 2, I probably wouldn't spend any time on it, in 3% of time or something. In year 3, as you're starting to get your own flywheel going, then you start having enough muscle mass that you can spend some energy on something that doesn't contribute to surviving this quarter, and start looking a little bit more at that partner ecosystem and saying, hey, is there a place where we can get a little bit of leverage and some air cover, but the first 2 years, it's pretty hard to think that it's going to contribute very much. And I think, and I would look more for tactical places where they can help. Meaning, are there places we can sell together, where not they're going to do a resale, right? But where it's a problem that's scoped in a way where, hey, every once in a while they pull us in when there's a particular use case, or where we're going to do joint webinars, or we're going to do joint marketing activities, or they're going to give me free space in their booth at a conference as we test this out. The likelihood that it contributes to leads is much higher than the likelihood that you've got a fully integrated resale partnership.
Yeah, that is a extremely helpful answer to how to think about partners. This has been an interview just filled with gold all throughout it. So I have 2 final questions for you. These are the 2 questions I always end every interview with. The first one is, what are you working on right after this interview? And it can be mundane, like eating a bologna sandwich, or it can be, I'm getting ready to fire somebody. It could be I'm getting ready to fund a new company, like whatever it is. What are you doing as soon as this interview's over?
As soon as this interview is over, so we basically think of the investment process. We've tried to use the language of agile programming. So on Monday morning, we think of our partner meeting as our investment scrum, and therefore we run 2 sprints, and so we basically try to decide what are the top 2 new investment opportunities that we're working on. And so right now, I'm in the middle of a sprint. I've got a set of commitments in terms of reference calls and understanding a new market, and I'm deep in a sprint. So I'm working reference calls on a new potential investment opportunity.
Wow, Scrum at the VC level. I've seen it all now. That's awesome. I've never heard of any other firm doing that, so that's really exciting. All right, second question. I think I might know what you're going to say, but I'll let you answer it. What is the best advice you have for any company that's trying to grow?
It always comes back to product market.
That's what I thought. Well, Greg, this has been a phenomenal interview. Once again, thanks for coming on Growth Hacker TV.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it. We'll look forward to talking again.